Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, March the 29th, 2023. Recently, very recently, there was a shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, in which 6-7 people were killed. Astrologers are somewhat morbid, when there's a big event, however horrific it is. Astrologers always want to know what time it happened and they set up the chart for it. And it doesn't matter if these astrologers are kind of nice, humanitarian people, or if they're sociopaths. It doesn't matter what the astrologer is like. They always are interested in the exact time of these big events. At least that's how it was when I was last associating with astrologers, which is quite a long time ago. I don't really get on with other astrologers. But anyway, I got a time for this shooting in Tennessee. It happened in a private religious school, or I don't know, was it Presbyterian or something in Tennessee? It happened at 10:13 in the morning, and I'm going to be looking at that chart. I'm also perhaps going to be looking at the chart of the person who did the shooting. A woman, I think. At least someone who started as a woman, but maybe has masculine pronouns or had masculine pronouns. I have got a date of birth. I didn't see a lot of very reassuring confirmation of that date of birth, 24th of March 1995. So it's possible I've got the wrong date, but as very few people watch my videos, I think it's okay to play with this date, see if it fits. And so I'm going to be looking at the shooting. I'm going to be looking at the potential horoscope of the person who did the shooting. But before I do that, I'm going to look at the stars for today. Today being Wednesday, March the 29th, 2023. So the moon continues to be in the sign of Cancer. So there it is, moon in Cancer, moving away from the opposition of Mars. So that's a bit less pressure. There's going to be a bit less anger than there was perhaps yesterday. The moon, you can see, is starting to make a square aspect with Jupiter. Now, when the moon makes square aspects with Jupiter, it can often, and it's also making a sextile to Venus. So the moon, in one sense, is making some very nice aspects. It's good for relationships, it's good for getting on with people, but it is a bit indulgent. Jupiter is a planet of excess. So when the moon squares Jupiter, there can be a temptation to spend too much money, or to eat too much, or to be overindulgent in terms of how we compliment people. So we need a bit of restraint there. So that does need to be watched. But overall, the moon is in a very good position. While this is going on, Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Uranus. And now I think this conjunction is going to be exact tomorrow. But when you've got Venus conjunct Uranus, there can be sudden events with other people. Relationships can change quickly. And this applies to all of us. But if you're of a sign ruled by Venus, perhaps you're a Libra or a Taurus, then you might feel this really strongly. But with Venus conjunct Uranus, there are going to be some unexpected meetings. Don't be surprised if people behave in an unusual way, but don't jump to conclusions. Just because someone's behaving strangely doesn't mean that they've got a good reason for behaving strangely. At the same time, Mars continues to be making a semi-square aspect to Uranus. I mean, that was exact yesterday, but it's still there. So I think all of us have got to watch out for accidents, we mustn't do anything stupid. It's not a time for taking risks, doing dangerous sports, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it really does need to be avoided. Now, something you can't see on that chart, which I talked about yesterday, is the fact that the planet Vulcan, the hypothetical planet Vulcan, is making a hard aspect to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And as I said, that is about power being out of control, people in power causing misery. In extreme situations, people in power causing death. So, don't believe what the powers that be tell you. If they're treating you badly, then you need to stand up for your rights. And if you are in a position of power and you are asserting yourself, then consider the possibility that you are being unreasonable and that you are causing misery. So it doesn't matter whether you're a soldier, politician, police officer, teacher, parent, whatever. Consider what impact you're having on the people that you're supposedly looking after or bossing around. So you need to be careful. Think about the consequences of what you are doing. Now, as far as the Nashville shooting is concerned, here is a chart for the Nashville shooting. I make it March. I was looking at the news sources. March the 27th, 2023, 10:13 a.m. was when the whole thing started. I don't think that the chart in itself is particularly amazing. Particularly signals, some terrible event. We can always find something if we look hard enough. But we have, what do we have? We have them. Remember I've just been talking about that Mars semi-square Uranus. That was certainly there. So that perhaps signifies the shooting. Or dramatic behavior. But yeah, sure, if you look hard enough you can always find something, but I'm not convinced that in itself it's a particularly ghastly chart. We can perhaps get another picture of the chart by doing the X-ray of the chart. The X-ray means looking at the 90-degree dial. And so if we look at the 90-degree dial, we might get we might pick up something different. And I particularly want to look at Pluto. There's the planet. There's Pluto. And we can see that Pluto is, at the time of that shooting, was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Pluto is about something dramatic that comes from nowhere and then causes death and destruction. So you might be thinking, though, yeah, Pluto was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint all over the world. So what's the big deal? Why was there a shooting in Nashville? Now, I would answer that perhaps by looking at the horoscope of the shooter, Audrey Hale. Audrey Elizabeth Hale, I think she was originally called. And you can't understand it without looking at the shooter. So assuming this birth time is right, you are getting an interaction between the person and the event. We also perhaps should look at Mars. Mars is a planet of anger, and there is our Mars. There's our Mars-Uranus semi-square, and this Mars-Uranus axis is hitting Saturn-Pluto. So Saturn-Pluto is about extreme tension and something having to explode. So what about Audrey Hale? Now, this chart, again, I wouldn't have said there's anything in this chart which says, oh yeah, this person must be a killer. Not really. But what we do know about Audrey Hale, as I understand it, is that Audrey Hale is a woman who apparently wanted to become a man, and started using masculine pronouns. So do we actually see that in the chart? Well, what is interesting about this chart is that the two male planets, Sun and Mars, they are the two masculine planets, and both of them are very strong. There, March the 23rd, Sun in Aries. Aries is a brilliant sign for the Sun to be in. It's because the Sun is exalted in Aries. Mars is in Leo, and Mars is in mutual reception to the Sun. Mars is in the Sun's sign. The Sun is in Mars's sign. So we have that interaction there. As far as the actual shooting is concerned, there's the Aries point. That's the world at large, and it is on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So Uranus and Pluto, these are two outer planets, which normally don't affect you. They don't really mean anything much. I mean, you can actually interpret a chart without looking at Uranus and Pluto, and they're quite generational. But this person, Audrey Hale, was really influenced by these high-level energies, having Aries on the Uranus-Pluto. Let me see, what does, looking at what does that mean, having Aries on the Uranus-Pluto? Looking at Vitter's book on the subject, Uranus-Pluto, if I look at it, so Aries on the Uranus-Pluto, the generality suddenly faces change conditions and must adapt itself to them. That's a bit cryptic, but it gives an idea of immense force, high-level forces that this person really couldn't deal with. At the same time, Audrey Hale had Pluto aspecting, in fact conjunct, the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, I just said that at the time of the shooting, Pluto was aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And Audrey Hale has Pluto on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So again, Mars-Saturn is death. This person chose their time. They chose this time to express that Pluto on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And I think that does have a lot to do with it. So those are a few points about the chart. As I said, this chart is, in many respects, is quite unexceptional. I don't think this is, you can't really look at this chart and say, this is a killer. Sun and Mars are very strong. And so perhaps in this case, this woman started off as a woman, strong masculine planets, at a time in history when there's a lot of attention given to transgenderism and moving from one gender to another, and so this person with a Sun-Mars trine really picked up on the spirit of the times, but perhaps couldn't really cope with it. Hence the Uranus-Pluto, Aries on the Uranus-Pluto, couldn't cope with it, was confused, overwhelmed by it, and was gripped by collective forces, and that is why we got this tragedy. Anyway, I feel I can't really say much more on the subject, particularly as we can't be 100% sure that Audrey Hale was born on March 24th, 1995, but I can't find any other birth date. So for the moment, we'll stick with that. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you managed to get through to the end. And I will talk to you tomorrow.